Have you ever felt exhausted from constantly trying to be a good person? Have you ever felt suffocated by your own kindness, where the more you compromise, the more you disappear? You may not realize it, but since childhood, you've been trained to obey. You were praised when you stayed quiet. You were punished when you dared to speak your truth. You learned how to hide yourself, and they called it humility. You learned how to give up on yourself, and they called it selflessness. And over time, you began to take pride in that. You called your fear calmness, called your softness passion, called your passivity virtue. But Nietzsche didn't see it that way. Nietzsche stared straight at the truth. Most people won't say out loud. Most of what you call morality is nothing more than a golden collar for the domesticated. Society loves the obedient. It rewards submission. It hands out prizes to those who know how to bow at the right moment. But at the same time, it despises and fears those wild souls who dare to live honestly. The ones who don't ask for permission to exist. The ones who don't need approval to be themselves. And that's exactly why Nietzsche doesn't comfort you. He doesn't hand you beautiful words. He doesn't build you a cozy nest. He pushes you to the edge, where every value you believed was noble starts to crumble, where you no longer know what is right. Only one question echoes endlessly. Why do you think it's right? If this is the first time you're hearing this, it might make you uncomfortable, even angry, because it's the truth you've been avoiding for far too long. You're not living, you're performing, playing the role of the good person others expect, and calling it morality. But deep inside, there is a part of you screaming to be set free. And this video is a call to that wild part of you, not to make you selfish, not to make you rebel, but to help you live fully, honestly, and without asking for permission. If what I'm saying resonates with you, click like and subscribe now, not just to continue this journey, but to remind yourself of one thing: you no longer live to please anyone. There's something that always lingers inside you. It's not anger, not immature rebellion, and not the selfish ego they told you to fear. It is the voice of your original self, the part you were taught to silence. You learned to bury your real emotions, just to be likable. You learned to nod when you disagreed, to smile when you weren't happy, to say it's okay while breaking inside. You called that maturity, but Nietzsche called it spiritual suicide. And after all those years spent pleasing others, you start to feel that something is wrong, not from the outside world, but from within. A hollow feeling, like something in you dies a little every time you say yes when your heart is screaming no. Like your soul is waiting for something to be set free. And it's in that moment that rebellion begins. Not a revolt against society, but a deep awakening from within, a primal whisper. That's enough. I can't live like this anymore. You begin to realize you weren't born to be someone else's ideal. You are not obligated to live a life someone else scripted. You begin to feel a longing to live authentically. So intense, it takes your breath away. You want to speak your mind without apologizing. You want to say no without feeling guilty. You want to leap forward without needing permission. But then fear arrives. Fear of being judged. Fear of being abandoned. Fear that if you live as your true self, you'll lose everything. That is the final prison Nietzsche wants you to escape. Not a physical cell, but a mental one built from fear and toxic teachings. We were taught that doing what we want is selfish, that being real is rebellious, that not obeying is destructive. So you chose silence. You kept suppressing yourself. You kept living as a tolerable version, in exchange for a little fake love, a little fleeting sense of being accepted. But Nietzsche stood in the middle of all those teachings and said something simple: let it be dangerous. Let yourself live truthfully. Even if it costs you, Let your soul ignite, even if it makes someone uncomfortable, because here's the truth. Not living authentically is the most dangerous thing of all. Living a lie, living to please, living to be called a good person will drain you day by day, without anyone noticing. You can wear the suit. You can smile politely. You can spend your life doing the right thing, and still die having never truly lived. Nietzsche isn't telling you to destroy everything. He's not advocating chaos. He's simply pointing to another path, the path of living from within. This journey won't be easy. It will force you to confront the truth about yourself, to abandon your safe roles, to walk away from relationships that only exist when you're no longer yourself. But in return, you'll gain the most precious thing of all, a self that was never tamed. And from that place, creativity, power, and true freedom will begin. So if something inside you is trying to break free, don't smother it. Don't call it wrong. Don't label it as a toxic ego. Listen to it. Respect it. And if you're brave enough, let it lead. If you feel this message speaks your truth, click like and subscribe, not just to follow the next video, but to mark the day you began living for yourself. Nietzsche declared that God is dead. He wasn't trying to shock the world. It wasn't an act of rebellion against religion. It wasn't some cheap provocation. It was to tell you something that Western civilization took centuries to realize. Absolute belief no longer exists. Everything you once called truth is now nothing more than a hollow shell. Morality, norms, religion, ethics, all are shaking. Not because they are wrong, but because you never chose to believe in them. You simply inherited them. You accepted them without question. You were born into a world already molded. A world that told you what is good and what is bad, what should be done and what is forbidden. A world that defined the meaning of life before you ever got to ask what you were living for. And then, Nietzsche arrived like an earthquake, tearing down that entire structure. He didn't come to give answers. He came to clear the wreckage of borrowed beliefs. Because when you live in a world where everything is predefined, you forget one simple truth. No one can live fully while following someone else's map. The death of God is the death of pre-assigned meaning, the death of unshakable values. It's the tolling bell that says it's time for you to redefine yourself. But do you know what happens when all the standards collapse? Not light, but chaos. A void, a dizzying shock, the feeling of hanging in midair, with nothing left to hold on to. And it is in that abyss that Nietzsche said something that shook all of humanity. It's time to give birth to a new kind of human. No longer a follower, no longer someone waiting to be saved, no longer one who lives by borrowed commandments, but the Übermensch, the overman, one who doesn't need a god to guide them, doesn't need religion to be redeemed, doesn't need society to justify their existence. They are the ones who create their own value system, who find the meaning of life, not from an ancient book, but from the depths of their own being. They don't live to please. They don't live to rebel. They live because they are the source of every choice. And Nietzsche whispers in your ear, if you are brave enough, you too can become such a person. But know this is not an easy road. It has no map, no signs, no crowd cheering for you. It's just you and the darkness you must walk into. You will have to let everything you once believed fall away. And from that ruin, rebuild your being from the ground up. Slowly, painfully, honestly. If you are in that phase right now, where all your old beliefs have lost meaning and you still don't know where you're going, know this. You are not alone, and you are right in the middle of a journey few dare to take. So if you're still here, still listening to these words, click like and subscribe right now. Not for me, but because you need a place to continue this journey. A place to remember that when everything collapses, you still have yourself. There is a kind of morality that society always praises, always encourages, always pushes you to follow. It sounds noble, but in truth, it is born from fear, from weakness, from the desire to control by those who cannot face the true power of human nature. Nietzsche called it slave morality, a morality not for life, but for submission, not to help you grow, but to make you obedient, not to set you free, but to turn you into a well-behaved tool in the hands of the majority. You were taught that a good person is one who always sacrifices, that a good person always yields, that a good person always says yes, even when their heart is screaming enough. And you believed it, because you feared that if you said no, others would abandon you. If you lived your truth, you would no longer be accepted. If you set boundaries, you would be labeled selfish. But Nietzsche saw right through that lie. He pointed out that most of the moral teachings you absorbed were created by those who weren't strong enough to define their own lives. They couldn't rise above, so they made rules to pull you down to their level. They didn't dare follow their instincts, so they labeled instinct as sin. They didn't pursue their desires, so they called ambition greed. And worse, they couldn't stand being alone. So they built an entire system of morality to drag all of us into the same cage. And you, even when you no longer believe in those teachings, still find yourself unable to break free, because a part of you still fears being seen as a bad person, still fears losing the image of the good person you've worked so hard to build. And that's when the mask takes over. You stop living honestly. You perform. You smile while your heart is cracking. You agree just to avoid conflict. You say the right things, but you no longer feel alive. And then, when you see someone living truthfully, daring to speak their mind, you feel annoyed, not because they are wrong, but because they are doing what you secretly wish you had the courage to do. Nietzsche understood that psychology. He called it moral resentment. When the weak cannot accept the freedom of the strong, so they create value systems to judge, suppress, and make you feel guilty for daring to live. And maybe, right now, you're living in that exact state, trying to be good, trying to be acceptable, trying to be kind, while losing yourself bit by bit. Nietzsche didn't come to comfort you. He came to rip off the illusion. To say this, true morality never demands you deny yourself. If a morality makes you feel small, guilty, suffocated, it's not morality. It's a chain. And if you're awake enough to see this, you've already begun to step outside the game of taming, of pretending, of pre-programmed virtue. No one can live fully with their soul imprisoned by forced goodness, and you don't have to live that way anymore. You don't need to always be accepted. You don't have to be the good one in everyone's eyes. You just need to be you, whole, strong, honest, and free. If you feel this is peeling off a mask you've worn for far too long, click like and subscribe. This is no longer just a YouTube channel. This is a place for awakening souls to step beyond slave morality and begin the journey of redefining themselves. Have you ever given something to someone and silently hoped they would be grateful? Have you ever helped someone, but felt hurt when you weren't acknowledged? If so, what you gave wasn't truly kindness. It was a hidden transaction wrapped in the cloak of morality. Nietzsche looked directly at this kind of morality and named it without mercy. Demanding virtue, a kind of virtue not born from wholeness, but from emptiness. It doesn't give because it's full. It gives, hoping to be filled. It's when you do the right thing, but deep down, expect praise, applause, or a flattering image of yourself. You're not really giving, you're negotiating. Cleverly, you offer kindness in exchange for being loved. And Nietzsche made it clear that's not morality. That's a survival strategy, dressed in noble words by society. And the most dangerous part, you don't even realize you're doing it. You think you're being good, but really, you're just trying hard to feel worthy. True virtue, according to Nietzsche, doesn't come from the desire to please. It doesn't come from the fear of being left behind. It comes from spiritual abundance. When you are full within yourself, you don't need recognition to give. You don't need others to be worthy of your help. You don't need a thank you look. Because you give simply because you cannot not give. Nietzsche called it overflowing morality. Like the sun, it doesn't choose whom to shine on. It doesn't demand that flowers show gratitude or that leaves bow in respect. It shines because that's its nature. Someone who lives with overflowing morality doesn't need to be seen as a good person, doesn't need a title, doesn't need a medal, doesn't need to prove anything, because they are already whole within themselves. And that is what Nietzsche wanted you to see. That the highest form of morality doesn't need to be called morality. It doesn't need to carry the label of nobility. It doesn't need to be defined by scripture or praised from a pulpit. It is simply the act of giving unconditionally, naturally, silently, and without expecting anything in return. And you know what's most beautiful about this way of living. You no longer feel hurt when you aren't repaid. You no longer feel bitter when ignored. You no longer feel used. Because you didn't give to gain. You gave because you were full. You gave because it is your essence, not a role you're trying to hold on to. And that frees you completely. If these words are helping you shed an invisible weight, a layer of niceness you've carried for far too long, then allow yourself to gently set it down and begin living like the sun, radiant, a whole, without needing applause. If you're still here, still walking this journey with me, click like and subscribe, because in the next part, Nietzsche will reveal the thin line between real kindness and the desperate hunger to be loved. Pause for a moment and ask yourself a simple question. Where are you living from? From within or from the outside? Because Nietzsche believed that all true freedom, all genuine power, all great action does not begin with society, with rules, or with the expectations of others. It begins from within you. Imagine a cup filled to the brim with water. It doesn't overflow because someone told it to. It doesn't pour out from fear of being useless. It overflows simply because it cannot hold any more. That is the image of true morality Nietzsche wanted to show you. Not suppression for praise, not sacrifice for affection, not pretending to be accepted, but overflowing without asking for permission. When a person lives in full connection with their essence, they don't need to try to be good. They don't need to prove their kindness. They don't need to force themselves to be generous, because everything they do, everything they give, flows from an inner source that never runs dry. And Nietzsche believed that source of power exists within all of us. But most people never reach it, because they spend their lives chasing moral templates until they forget the sound of their own voice. Have you ever done that? Have you ever suppressed your real emotions just to maintain a good image? Lived against your instincts just to avoid disappointing others? Given so much that you felt empty? If you have, you're not wrong. You were simply never taught that an empty soul cannot truly give. You don't need to try harder to give. You need to restore the flow that's been blocked inside you. And to do that, you'll have to let go of a lot. Let go of the fear of judgment. Let go of the need to be praised. Let go of the role of the good person you've been clinging to for too long. Let go of living just to be loved. Nietzsche called this a metamorphosis of the self, when you no longer live to fit in, but to become your most radiant self. Not good by society's standards, but authentic by your soul's definition. And the miracle is this: when you are truly whole inside. Everything you do on the outside becomes effortless. You don't need to calculate. You don't need to manage your image. You don't need to strain to appear moral. You act from essence, like the sun rising each day, like the rain that comes and goes, like an artist creating a masterpiece, simply because they cannot not create. That is the nature of true power. It doesn't need marketing. It doesn't need applause. It simply is. And if you've ever felt exhausted from trying to be a good person, try sitting with yourself. Ask, where am I living from? Is my inner energy still flowing? Or am I trying to be good because I fear that without it, I'd have no worth? If the answer hurts, know this: you've just begun the most important journey of your life. The journey from the outside back to the inside. And if you want to keep going even deeper, where Nietzsche will show you how to live as a full, powerful, and untouchable being from your core. Click like and subscribe, because in the next part, we'll step into a higher level of awakening where you no longer live for morality, but from the self that can never be manipulated. There's a truth that most people are afraid to face. Even the noblest parts of you will one day die. Even kindness, even morality, even the purest giving will eventually fade, dry out, and need to be released. Nietzsche never romanticized this. He never said that morality would last forever if you tried hard enough. He never promised that if you stayed pure, you would never run out. In fact, he said the opposite. Everything that is born must die. Even the most beautiful virtue has a lifespan. And if you cannot accept that, you will turn virtue into a new form of bondage. A golden chain radiant, yes, but one that traps your soul just as much as pretense ever could. Zarathustra, the symbolic figure Nietzsche created, after giving everything, after shining like a blazing sun of truth, withdrew quietly. Not because he was exhausted, but because he understood something: even light must fade to be reborn. And that is a lesson few are mature enough to embrace. No one can give endlessly without depletion. No one can live forever in the light without going blind. No one can inspire the world without knowing when to return and nourish themselves. Retreat is a sacred part of the life cycle. It is when morality renews itself, when it's no longer tied to the need for recognition. And this is where Nietzsche introduced a supreme concept. Letting go of morality is not betrayal. It is the final stage of spiritual evolution. You are not abandoning your values. You are allowing them to die when it is time, so that something more real, more profound, more mature can be born. Because you know what happens to a soul that gives without pause. It dries up. It starts resenting the very people it once helped. It turns love into duty, giving into obligation, kindness into pressure, and morality into a bloody sacrifice that no one understands. Nietzsche didn't want you to become a saint, nailed to your own virtue. He wanted you to become a free human being, someone who knows how to live fully when full, and disappear quietly when empty. Like an artist who knows when to end the song. Like a sage who knows when to fall silent. Like the sun that knows when it must set. Maturity is not how long you can hold on to morality. It's knowing when to let go without feeling like you've lost anything. Because you understand, you are not morality. You are not kindness. You are not what others expect from you. You are the source of all of it. And when the time comes, you are also the one who ends it to make space for something deeper. If you've ever felt tired from always giving, if you've ever felt lost in the very light you created, if you've ever wanted to disappear but feared being misunderstood as weak, then Nietzsche's message is for you. Disappear, not to run away, but to be reborn, because true light never tries to shine. It only needs time to be rekindled from within. If this part touched something deep inside you, click like and subscribe, not because I need you to stay, but because you deserve a space to retreat in peace and return in power. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is disappear. Not to escape. Not because you're tired, but because you've given enough. You've lived enough. And now it's time to return to yourself. Zarathustra, after sharing all he knew, did not stay to be praised. He didn't wait to be honored. He withdrew quietly, deliberately, because he understood even the light needs to dim for a while to be reborn from within. Nietzsche never encouraged constant presence. He didn't believe you need to always shine to be worthy. On the contrary, he taught something few dare to live by. That timely absence is a sign of disciplined strength. In a world that worships busyness, silence is mistaken for failure. Retreat is labeled as weakness. Disappearance is treated as shameful. But Nietzsche knew, the one who knows when to stop is the one who no longer needs an audience to validate their worth. You cannot give endlessly without running dry. You cannot be present all the time without losing yourself. And you cannot hear the voice within if you're always chasing the noise outside. So, if you feel tired, if your heart feels empty, don't try to shine any brighter. Go back, be silent, and allow your soul to be reborn in the dark. Because sometimes, disappearing is not the end. It's the beginning of a return deeper, stronger, and more real. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is disappear, not to escape, not because you're tired, but because you've given enough. You've lived enough. And now it's time to return to yourself. Zarathustra, after sharing all he knew, did not stay to be praised. He didn't wait to be honored. He withdrew quietly, deliberately, because he understood even the light needs to dim for a while to be reborn from within. Nietzsche never encouraged constant presence. He didn't believe you need to always shine to be worthy. On the contrary, he taught something few dare to live by. That timely absence is a sign of disciplined strength. In a world that worships busyness, silence is mistaken for failure. Retreat is labeled as weakness. Disappearance is treated as shameful. But Nietzsche knew, the one who knows when to stop is the one who no longer needs an audience to validate their worth. You cannot give endlessly without running dry. You cannot be present all the time without losing yourself. And you cannot hear the voice within if you're always chasing the noise outside. So if you feel tired, if your heart feels empty, don't try to shine any brighter. Go back, be silent, and allow your soul to be reborn in the dark. Because sometimes, disappearing is not the end. It's the beginning of a return deeper, stronger, and more real. It's time to turn off the noise. Turn off the social media. Turn off the expectations. Turn off even the voices in your head that are not truly yours. Nietzsche didn't want you to chase artificial light. He wanted you to return inward to the place where your real voice has been waiting to be heard. In the silence, you'll realize the hardest truth to accept. You don't have to do anything to be worthy. You have value even when you're not useful to anyone. Society will never teach you this. It wants you to always be visible, always radiant, always performing. But Nietzsche was different. He said, when you have nothing left to give, that's when you begin to truly exist. Disappearance is not weakness. It is a declaration that you are brave enough to stop, to listen to yourself, and to return. If you're standing at that threshold right now, write this commitment. I choose the silence that allows me to be reborn. Click like if your heart nodded. Subscribe if you need a quiet space to return to. And disappear. For a while. No one needs to understand. As long as you finally start to hear yourself. There's a subtle difference, but it changes everything. Between trying to shine and being the source of light itself. A person who tries to shine is always anxious. They fear not being seen, fear being outshone, fear they're not good enough, fear being forgotten. But a person who is the light doesn't have to try. They don't chase attention. They don't wave for approval. They don't struggle to prove they matter because they've become their truest self. And that alone is enough. Nietzsche never asked you to be a good person by society's standards. He never encouraged you to be remarkable by the world's definition. He wanted you to become real. So real, you couldn't be copied. A free soul. A life form that generates light from within. Not borrowed from second-hand morality. Not fueled by outdated religion. Not chained by anyone's expectations. And to become that, you must pass through many deaths. The death of living to please. The death of fearing abandonment. The death of the ego that always begs for applause. Only when those masks fall can true light emerge. Not light shining on you from outside, but light rising from deep within you. Nietzsche didn't write for the masses. He wrote for the lonely but brave. Those willing to trade comfort for truth. Willing to live misunderstood. Just to live authentically. And if you've made it to this final part, if you've listened to every word, felt every truth, and dared to face yourself to the very core, then I don't need to conclude anything for you. You already understand. You don't need anyone's validation. You don't need applause. Just remember this, you don't have to become the light. You only need to live as the source you already are. And if that speaks to you, click like. As a silent handshake between you and me, a quiet nod of recognition. Subscribe if you need a place where no one pressures you to be special, only to be real. And if you're ready, stand up. But don't step forward to be seen. Step forward to finally see yourself.